Hi, Claudia here from Create with Claudia, and today I'm going to show you a quilt pattern for a small wall hanging. It's about 30 by 30, and it has an applique in the center of the Aum symbol, A-U-M or O-M symbol. It's quite a spiritual symbol. I'm familiar with it though through yoga, and I just thought it would be a fun little quilt to make. Here's what it looks like. This is in gold tones. I've made it in a couple different versions as well. It's an easy quilt to make, although it does have some points, so you got to really watch that. Take a little bit of time when you're sewing, and the applique is a little bit different, but all in all, it's an easy quilt to put together. You can download the free PDF pattern on my website, www.createwithclaudia.com, and I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel. I try to post a video every week, once a week. I try to, I'm not always successful, of various projects, mostly quilt projects, but I have some other fabric crafts as well as some other crafts thrown in, and I also do some quilting and sewing tips. You can also check me out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where I post daily pics of things I'm working on, sneak peeks of projects coming up, and sneak peeks of my free patterns. So I hope you give this quilt a try. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy the video. Okay, for this wall hanging, you're going to need 7 different types of fabric. Of course, if you'd like, you can make less or more. Depends on what you want to do. I've chosen 7 different brightly colored ones that I sort of fell in love with. I fell in love with my focus fabric, which is this stripe. And this is how you're going to need them cut. So this would be fabric A, and that's the center panel here. So fabric A, you're going to need to cut 1 square of fabric, 10.5 inches. Okay. For fabric B, which is this gold fabric, you're going to need 4 squares, and fabric B is this sort of rust colored section right here. These are going to be half square triangles. You're going to need 4 squares of fabric B, cut 6.25 inches. For fabric C, this blue here, which is like this sort of rust floral or rust leaf pattern, here it is here too. Again, for half square triangles, you're going to need 4 squares of fabric C, cut 6.25 inches. For fabric D, you're going to need a little bit more, and that's for this part right here. That's this darker square, almost brown green square. It's actually not a square, it's made up of half square triangles. You're going to need 8 squares of fabric D, cut 6.25 inches. For fabric E, you're going to need 2 different cuts. First you're going to need, for fabric E, for this part of this is fabric E here, this sort of light polka dot one, and for that you're going to need 4 squares of fabric E cut 6.25 inches, and that's for this half square triangle right here. And then for these squares you're going to need 8 squares cut 5.5 inches, and that's a fabric E. So 8 squares at 5.5 inches, 4 squares at 6.25. And then you're going to need for fabric F, it's the corner, this greenish corner right here. You're going to need 4 squares cut 5.5 inches. So 4 squares of fabric F cut 5.5 inches. And lastly, I just dropped my pattern on the floor. For the applique, which is the Aum symbol right here, sort of almost looks like a little bit like a 3, but it's not. You're going to need a square of fabric, and I use black. I think it pops nicely with the background. You're going to need 1 square cut just about 11 inches, just to be safe. I like to make it a little bit bigger so that I have enough room for the applique, a little bit more generous. If you're using a fabric, maybe with a pattern, and depending on what the pattern is, you may want to make it a little bit larger, but I think 11 inches is a good rule of thumb. So the first thing we're going to need to do is actually transfer the applique shape onto the fabric. So let me move all this other stuff out of the way. The other supplies you're going to need a piece of fusible webbing with a paper back. So it's a paper backed fusible webbing. On the one side it's paper, on the other side it's a little gummy or a little rough texture, and that's the adhesive side. And then you're going to get this template. Now it's backwards, and it always surprises me when you have to do it this way, but it makes sense. Once you do it, you'll see why. Because when you put it on the back of the fabric, it reverses the direction. This backwards symbol can be found on my website. I have a downloadable pattern for this quilt, so that should help you out. but that's what you're going to use to trace out your shape on the fusible webbing. So you're going to lay this on top, and it's nice and dark so you can see really easily through. And then you're going to trace around the entire shape. The symbol is actually made out of 3 different shapes, and I'm going to go ahead and trace them out. I don't cut them out yet. Take your time when you're tracing, that way it looks nice and smooth. Nice thing about paper is it's erasable. You can go back and fix it if you need to. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. You may want to tape this onto a surface. I don't choose not to, but it's up to you. Maybe it's easier if you choose it, tape it nice and flat. That might be easier for some people. So. Okay, so it's all traced out, and then I'm going to set this aside, and like I said, it's backwards, but that's okay. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut it out. Now, we're not going to cut out each individual shape yet. We're just going to cut out a circle around it. I find it much easier to put onto the fabric and cut out the shape once the fusible webbing has been applied to the fabric, the back of the fabric. So I just like to get rid of this excess paper. All right, and now we're ready to put it on the fabric for the applique. So I chose this black fabric, and I did earlier found the back side. It's always really tricky to find the back side of certain fabrics. This one was really hard. And honestly, it's so close that it probably doesn't even matter. And you're going to take it over to your pressing surface, and depending on your manufacturer's instructions, you're going to adhere this to the back side of the fabric. So you're going to put this sort of rough side, or the adhesive side, onto the back side of your applique fabric. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go to my pressing surface and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is nice. It's cooled, so I can touch it. It's no problem here. And now's the time when you want to cut out the shape. So you're just going to cut out along those lines you drew earlier, and use a nice good pair of sharp scissors. Although I wouldn't use your fabric scissors because the paper may dull them. I'm real careful with protective of my fabric scissors. So, all right. So here we go. Okay, so we have cut it out, and it's a little tricky to work with, but there it is. It sort of falls into place, and there are the other 2 pieces. And now we're going to put it on our center panel. But first we need to remove that paper backing, and I learned this trick from one of my viewers, my video subscribers. You score it with a pin. In all the years that I've used paper-backed fusible webbing, I never realized that till, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so. And you're just going to scratch it. It makes it so much easier to take this stuff off. And there you can see it leaves like a little residue, a sticky residue, and that's that adhesive. Just going to peel that off and toss it. This is always the tricky one. this to me, this cutting out this shape is probably the hardest part of this whole quilt. And that just peels right off, and you throw that away. And then you're going to need your background panel, that middle panel, fabric A, that we cut out earlier. Now I'm using a directional fabric. You can use whatever you want, but if you're using a directional, you have to be really careful how you place your shape. So then you're going to lay it here. Now normally I would also do this on my pressing surface, but for the camera I'm going to do this here. And now you will see how you're going to lay it. It takes a little bit of manipulating, no big deal. It takes a few minutes. It should lay really nice and flat. Just going to smooth it out. Now you want to center it nicely in your square here. And you got to watch. Remember, you're using that 1/4 inch seam allowance, so you don't want it too far to the left or right or top or bottom, or it'll get sewn over. Let's pull it down just a little bit. I think it could go over to the right this way a little bit. Because, like I said, this is the trickiest part. It's just getting it how you want it. Okay, that looks right. I might pull it. Whoop. Well, don't get your fingers caught on it. That's what happens. All right, and then you're going to put the rest of it on. And you're going to make sure you do it the right way. See, I'm going to have to manipulate this a little bit more. I would pull this down a little bit. And once you're happy with it, like I said, it's easier to do this on the pressing surface. You're going to take it over, and per the manufacturer's instructions for your fusible webbing, you're going to go ahead and apply this to your center square. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so that is nice. It's been nicely pressed. Get all the little fuzzies off. You want to do that before you iron it on. Now this is nice and cool, so I'm ready to use it. I'm going to set it aside later, so when I put together the quilt, this will be the center panel. Now at this point, on my other two quilts that you saw at the beginning of the video, I finish off the edges of my applique. On one I did a straight stitch just all the way around, but on the other I did a zigzag, a real tight, narrow zigzag stitch. Almost a satin stitch. You could do a satin stitch. I think it adds a nice finish to it. This is not a quilt you're going to use and wash a lot. It's basically a wall hanging. It's 30 by 30. So you don't need anything too strong to hold the applique shape down. Let's say if you were going to wash it and then it would come up. The fusible webbing is pretty strong, so you don't need to put a nice edge to it. I just think it sort of finishes it off. I'm not going to do that today, but that's an option for you. Okay. So now we're going to be making the half square triangles, and you're going to need 20 of them total. So you do have a fair amount of half square triangles for this quilt. You will not need your smaller squares. This is fabric F and this is fabric E. These are the 5.5 inch squares. You're going to set those aside because those you don't need to do anything with. You will use those later in the quilt. But you are going to need your 4 different fabrics that are cut 6.25 inch squares. And to make the different pairs, you're going to pair them up as follows. So remember, this was fabric B. So for fabric B, you're going to take 2 squares of the fabric B and pair them up with 2 squares of fabric C. All right, so these will be your first pair. So that's 1. The next thing, you're going to need 2 pairs of fabric C with fabric D. So you're going to need the last 2 pieces of last 2 squares of fabric C with 2 squares of fabric D. So that's another pair. Those are 2 more pairs you're going to get. Then you're going to use your last 2 squares of fabric D. There's 2 pieces here. And you're going to pair that up with 2 squares of fabric D. So there's another set. And the last one is fabric D. You should have 4 squares remaining of this, and then your 4 squares of fabric E, and those are going to be your last set of half square triangles. So like I said, altogether you're going to have 20 half square triangles, and they're going to be paired up like this. So I'm going to show you how to do 1 half square triangle, and then I'm going to sew the rest together, and we'll show you how they look. So we'll just go ahead and do these. Okay, so to do a half square triangle, you're going to take 1 of each fabric. So here's my B, and here's my C. And on the lighter fabric, whichever fabric you want, you're going to draw a line. And draw a diagonal line right here, like so, from corner to corner. And there you can see it. There's my line. And then you're going to take your other square, this square of fabric C, lay them on top of each other with the line side, with right sides facing. So you're going to put the right sides facing each other. Line them up nice and evenly. Smooth it out. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch on each side of this line. You don't want to sew on that drawn line. You're going to sew a 1/4 inch along here and a 1/4 inch along here. And then that'll make your 2 half square triangles once you cut them apart. So I'm going to show you that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here it's sewn. I don't know if you can see it. I'm using beige thread, so it might be hard to see on this yellow. Here we go. We probably see it easier on this side. On the other side, of course, is the drawn line, but there would be a drawn line in the middle, and then you can see my 2 seams along that drawn line, like so. And then you're going to take your rotary cutter and your ruler, and you're going to cut along that drawn line. Oops. So there's my line. I'm going to just cut with my rotary cutter and ruler and split this in half. All right, so there you go. Now it's split in half. If you unfold it, there's your half square triangle. Ta-da! So you get 2 blocks out of the 2 pairs of fabric. Now I'm going to press these, and I'll be right back because you're still going to need to trim it down. This isn't the exact size you need, so I'll be right back. Okay, so here they are nicely pressed, and I'm going to trim one down, and then what I'm going to do is take a break, and I'm going to sew all the rest of the half square triangles and show you when they're all done. To trim these in half, I have this small square ruler. It's 6.5 inches. And it's nice because it has that diagonal line, which is what I do to trim these down. I line that diagonal line along that diagonal line, and then find my 5.5 inch measure. You can see these are bigger. I like to make larger half square triangles and then trim them down. And it just takes a few seconds. And I'll trim one side. Okay, and then flip it around, and then use this corner as the point where the 5.5 inches is on this road. It has nice little lines here that help you a lot. Line it up nicely, your 5.5 inches, because that's how big you want this square to be. All your squares in this quilt are 5.5 inches. All right. So there's your 5.5 inch half square triangle. I'm going to go ahead and finish up all the rest of the pairs, and I'll be back to show you the results. Okay, so here are all my half square triangles. They've all been pressed and trimmed, and they're ready to go. Every one of them is cut to 5.5 inches square, and now we're ready to lay out the whole quilt top. So here we go. Okay, you're going to lay out your center, and then I'm going to just start with my rows. This tabletop is just a little teeny bit too small, so hopefully you'll be able to see it. I'm going to overlap them a little bit. Okay, now there it is laid out, ready to sew together. I'm going to sew the rows together. Like I said, this tabletop's a little bit small, so I had to overlap them, but you can see here how I'm going to sew them together. I'm going to sew the rows together first, and I'll come back and show you how they look, and then we'll sew the rows, the individual pieces in the rows together first, and then the rows together, and then we'll have a quilt top. So I'll be right back. Basically, I'm going to piece this piece to this piece, this piece to this piece, this piece to this piece, and so on. The one thing is, you have to stay a little bit organized when you're piecing this top. In fact, I might mark my rows, or I just do one row at a time, because you can get these pieces twisted around. The first time I did this, I had it all wonky. I thought I had it all down pat, and I didn't. So I had to do a lot of seam ripping, which is not my favorite thing. So again, row by row, and I'll be right back. Okay, like I said, the tabletop's just a little bit small for this, but now I've sewn the rows together, as you can see, like so. And now I'm going to piece the rows together like so to finish it up. The one thing I do want to point out in the center part, this is a larger panel, of course, than the smaller squares. So you're going to have to piece this section together first and this section together first, and then attach it to the center panel with the applique symbol on it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to sew the rows together like so, and I'll be right back to show you the finished product. All right, so here is my top. It's all finished. I love the way this one turned out. I've done this in 3 different color versions. I'll show the other 2 in a second. I really like this one. I really like the way they came together. The one thing I will warn you when you are piecing this quilt, let me get rid of all these threads that are floating around. There are a lot of points, so take your time when you're piecing it so that you get some nice sharp points and it looks really sharp and crisp. So that's it. It's a nice easy quilt to make. It takes a little bit of time. And the other thing I will add, if you don't want the Aum symbol in the middle, you don't have to have the Aum symbol in the middle. It's just that was the theme of this quilt. So I'm going to show you the other version. So this was the version we made today. A little bit of sort of toned down or muted rainbow colors, I guess you could call it. This was my tester version, and this one's already quilted, and it's more in pinks and purples. You can see I like this too. It's a little totally different look. It's amazing how different fabric changes the look of a quilt. And then lastly is this one, and this is in autumn colors. Whoops. Fall colors, more rusts and golds. I really like this one. You can see here where I did that zigzag stitching around the shape. So I don't know which one I like the best. I mean, I sort of am veering towards one. I won't say which one's my favorite, but they're all different. This one also is already quilted. But here we go. This is my gold, more autumn tone ones, my pink purple one, and then the one we made today. You'll back it and quilt it as desired. It's all up to you. I hope you like this project. This would be really pretty in maybe a meditation space in your house or your bedroom, wherever you want to put it. I think it would look great anywhere. If you're looking for the free pattern, it's on my website, www.createwithclaudia.com. Just look under quilting. If it's not on the home page, it'll be on the home page for a little bit, but if you're coming at this a couple weeks after I've posted the tutorial, it'll be under the quilting tab. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post videos. I try to post videos weekly. It doesn't always work out that way, but usually it's one a week. I do quilts, fabric crafts. I even throw in some other kinds of crafts. I also do some quilting tips. So all kinds of things you'll find there on my YouTube channel. So do me a favor and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great day.